Welcome to the Blackwell Archives. The recording labeled C12A. The last broadcast of Station 12 was discovered inside a sealed metal container beneath the ruins of an abandoned signal relay tower. According to the original timestamp burned into the audio file, it was created on a night when an electrical storm swept across the region, one strong enough to take every transmission line offline except for one, Station 12, a small community broadcast channel no one seemed to remember having existed. The recovered audio begins with heavy static and a faint hum, almost like a distant generator struggling to stay alive. Beneath that hum, however, another faint pattern becomes noticeable, some rhythmic pulse. Too controlled to be random interference, too consistent to be natural. Archivists later described it as a breathing line, as if the static itself were inhaling and exhaling. Slowly, the voice of the station's host emerges. At first, the recording is nearly unintelligible. Words warp and smear into one another. But gradually, the host's tone stabilizes. He identifies himself simply as the night broadcaster, a title that suggests regular listeners, though no public record shows that the station had any audience at all. He speaks as if addressing a familiar community, offering late-night updates about weather conditions, local events and power outages. All the places he references are either fictional or long abandoned. The host describes an approaching storm that has knocked out communications across neighboring towns. Normally, a broadcast like this would serve to reassure people, but the tone he uses is uncertain, almost as though he's trying to comfort himself. As the storm grows stronger, the broadcaster begins to hear something outside the station's walls. He mentions footsteps on the gravel, then dismisses them as branches falling or the wind dragging debris. Minutes later, he notes a shadow passing the window. The description is brief, almost casual, but the audio registers a tremor in his voice that suggests genuine fear. The hum under the static deepens, shifting into a low-frequency vibration that causes the entire waveform to ripple. The night broadcaster seems to hear it as well. He pauses mid-sentence, microphone picking up the faint sound of him standing, moving toward the window, then returning. He tries to continue reading the night schedule, but his voice keeps drifting away from the script. The storm outside escalates, thunder cracks close enough to distort the recording, and something metallic rattles violently. The broadcaster apologizes to his listeners for the noise, even though it's clear he is alone, in a forgotten building talking to a dead channel. Halfway through the recording, he stops following the script altogether. Instead, he begins describing the sensation that something is listening to him from the other side of the statics. Something that is drawing closer every time he speaks. He says he feels pressure in his ears, like someone whispering through the wires. At this point, the hum resolves into an identifiable pattern. It mirrors his speech, echoing the last 2 or 3 syllables of every sentence with a distorted delay. For a moment it sounds like feedback, but after several repetitions it becomes evident the echo is not aligned with his voice. It slightly anticipates him, as though it speaks the syllables a fraction of a second before he does. The night broadcaster stops talking. Silence stretches for nearly 10 seconds. The hum becomes louder. When he finally speaks again, he doesn't address the audience. He speaks to something in the room with him. He asks, "How long have you been following the signal?" And then he corrects himself. "How long have you been making the signal?" The response is not voiced, but the audio reacts. There's a sudden shift in amplitude. Like a breath against the microphone, the static momentarily clears, replaced by a crystalline tone that does not match any natural frequency. Archivists later concluded it resembled a form of communication, though not one meant for human perception. The broadcaster whispers that he can see the shape behind the glass. The storm sounds distant now, replaced by a deep resonance that moves in cycles, like waves hitting a hollow structure. The host describes a figure standing outside the studio window, tall, unmoving, outlined by the faint emergency light. He does not describe it in detail. He only says that the figure seems to form itself from the static, as though its body is a solidification of interference patterns. He backs away from the window, forgetting that the microphone is still live. His breaths become harsher, uneven. The hum beneath the recording rises to a nearly painful intensity. Suddenly, an object strikes the station door with enough force to shake the equipment. The night broadcaster drops something, likely a clipboard or a script, given the soft paper flutter. He tells himself it's the wind, but the tone of his voice betrays him. Another impact follows. Then another. The broadcaster tries to sign off, as though formal closure might end the event. He begins his outro. "This is Station 12, signing off," but cannot finish. The door creaks inward, not from force but from the absence of it. as though something on the other side simply removes the resistance holding it shut. The hum becomes a deep, resonant chord, identical to the one heard earlier but layered with additional tones, harmonics that rise in unnatural intervals. The host whispers that the figure is inside. He describes it in fragments. A body shaped like a silhouette carved from mist, a head tilted unnaturally, arms too long, fingers tapering into threads of static. The equipment picks up no footsteps, only changes in air pressure, as though the intruder does not walk but shifts its existence from one point to another. The broadcaster gasps and says he can hear the thing behind the microphone. He claims it is speaking through the wires, its voice carried by every frequency the station has ever used. As the entity draws closer, the audio begins to fracture. Multiple overlapping sound layers emerge, all of them versions of the broadcaster's voice, but each one speaking a slightly different sentence. One version screams, another prays, another continues reading the weather report as though nothing is happening. The entity appears to be pulling echoes of the broadcaster from the recording itself. The night broadcaster attempts to flee. Footsteps pound the floor, followed by a sharp crack of thunder that fuses with the static. The hum vanishes entirely, replaced by a silence so total it feels intentional. After a full minute of nothing, the microphone captures a faint shuffling, then a single calm exhale. A new voice speaks, perfectly clear without distortion. It is not the broadcaster. It sounds like someone imitating him, but the cadence is wrong, too even, too measured. The voice says, "Station 12 will continue its service." A long pause. Then, "We are always broadcasting." The recording ends abruptly, but a secondary file was discovered attached to the same container. It is only 3 seconds long. A faint burst of static, followed by a whisper that matches neither the broadcaster nor the entity. The whisper says one word, "listening," and then cuts out. When archivists attempted to isolate the whisper, they found that its waveform did not behave like human speech. It carried markers of synthetic frequencies, yet also traces of biological resonance. A hybrid sound, impossible to classify. Further analysis revealed something even stranger. The frequency pattern of the whisper appeared to be time-stamped 3 days in the future from the moment the recording was found, as though the message had been sent ahead of time. Shortly after this discovery, the research terminal used to study the file began autoplaying the recording each night at the exact timestamp the original broadcast had occurred. Even after the hard drive was replaced, the pattern continued. The signal returned again and again, weaker each time, as though fading from distance rather than storage decay. Eventually, the playback shifted from the full broadcast to only the final phrase, "We are always broadcasting." That phrase now exists on multiple devices that were never connected to the original terminal, appearing randomly in local storage or cache folders without user input. It does not replicate aggressively. It simply appears once, waits to be discovered, and then vanishes. Those who hear it often report a strange sensation afterward, a faint pressure in the ears, a hum beneath silence, and an impression that somewhere, just beyond the reach of auditory range, someone is still speaking. No physical remains of the night broadcaster were ever recovered. The tower itself collapsed several years after the recording was uncovered, following a lightning strike. Locals claim the strike occurred on a night when every other channel in the region went silent except one. A weak signal broadcast through the static for nearly 2 minutes before cutting out. Those who listened said the message was faint but unmistakable. Station 12 is still on the air.